runs something even older than that, equivalent to 1 billion devices. They said the point is brought home by new testing from consumer group Which, WHICH, that's a site, .co.uk, discovering that it was possible to infect popular older handsets mainly running Android 7, the Motorola X, Samsung Galaxy A5, Sony Xperia Z2, the Google Nexus 5, and they said parens LG, and the Samsung Galaxy S6 with mobile malware. All the above, they said, were vulnerable to a recently discovered Bluetooth flaw known as BlueFrag and to the Joker strain of malware from 2017. The older the device, the more easily it could be infected. They said Sony's Xperia Z2, running Android 4.4.2, was vulnerable to the stage fright flaw from 2015. Of course, Leo, we spent a lot of time back then talking about stage fright because it was so bad. It was a flaw in the um, in the library that rendered images that runs with kernel privileges. And because MMS messages were able to send images, just the receipt of a specially crafted MMS message could take over the phone. And I was curious, so I went to Amazon. The Sony Xperia Z2 is for sale today on Amazon new. It is and will always be vulnerable to the very worrisome stage fright vulnerability, where, as I said, just the receipt of a specially crafted MMS message is sufficient to remotely take over the phone. So here we're selling new Android-based devices, which are already out of their update period, will never be updated, and they've got some of the worst, most widespread, well-known vulnerabilities. So they're vulnerable from the start. Google recently had to remove 1,700 apps containing Joker. That's the Joker strain of malware from 2017, also known as Bread, from its Play Store. And that's only the latest in its increasingly desperate rearguard action against malware being hosted under its nose on the Google Play Store. And it's not simply that these devices aren't getting security fixes any longer, but the older models also miss out on a bundle of security and privacy enhancements that Google has added later to versions 9 and 10. So Kate Bevan, who's a computing editor for which.co.uk, she was formerly with Naked Security, she wrote, "It's very concerning that expensive Android devices have such a short shelf life before they lose security support, leaving millions of users at risk of serious consequences if they fall victim to hackers." She also raised the interesting point that the idea that a device might only get updates for 2 years probably comes as a surprise to most Android users. She said, quote, "Google and phone manufacturers need to be upfront about security updates with clear information about how long they will last and what customers should do when they run out." And of course, Google, they're doing the best they can. They said in response to this, "We're dedicated to improving security for Android devices every day. We provide security updates with bug fixes and other protections every month and continually work with hardware and carrier partners to ensure that Android users have a fast, safe experience with their devices." In other words, nothing. But what can they do? They are offering Android to third parties to include in smartphones, and they don't have control over what those third parties do in detail. And when I was thinking about this issue with awareness, it's true about the difference in smartphone handling versus, for example, PC handling. Anyone still using Windows 7 will have received, I did, a big full screen warning that it is no longer safe to use this operating system. You can't not be aware of that fact as a desktop OS user. But no smartphone suddenly warns its user that it's no longer safe to use it. They just stop receiving security updates if they ever get them in the first place after the original sale, and that's it. Users just sort of go on not knowing any better. And Sophos continued or ended their coverage about this, saying, in truth, users are being squeezed between two forces. On the one hand, Google is determined to drive the evolution of Android for competitive reasons, releasing a new version every year. On the other side are manufacturers eager to keep people upgrading to new models on the pretext that the older ones won't run these updated versions of Android, which turns out not to always be true. They said security sits somewhere between the two, and despite attempted reforms by Google in recent years to make security fixes happen on a monthly cycle, the reality is some way from that ideal. And of course, we talk about this all the time. I don't know what we could do about this.
Should I stop recommending Android phones and just say, you just need to buy an iPhone? I hate to see a monoculture, but I think it might be prudent.
I know. I mean, this really is a problem.
I guess it's safe to only buy a Google Android device. But then, even then, after 3 years, they stop updating it.
Yeah, and so I mean, you could argue we know how important security updates are. People are being hacked. It's and this is being leveraged against them. In last few months, we've talked about specific Android issues which would affect somebody crossing the border, where it's possible for their Bluetooth to be leveraged against them and to put malware on their phone unless they have this most recent, I think it was last month's update. Otherwise, that phone is and will always be vulnerable. So, I mean, it to be responsible, the phone should bring up a warning, make it very clear that this device is no longer receiving security updates. I mean, it almost ought to be something dismissible but nagging, on an edge of the screen where you have to push it. Very much like say, oh, look, we're using cookies on your browser. It's like, yes, yeah. And you're forced to say, yes, I know. I mean, we've talked about how annoying that is, but I mean, the user should be informed at this point, and then they could decide whether that matters to them or not. And maybe you could press a button to get a detail of all the things that have been fixed. I mean, I don't know if your typical Android user cares, but still, I would say at a minimum, if the Android OS detects that it is no longer receiving updates, it should proactively begin notifying its user. And they can dismiss the notice, but it should come back in a week, and they dismiss it again, and it comes back a week later, just to say, just so you know, you're not getting up. This phone is no longer being updated. And so that would have two effects. It would inform users. It would allow them to decide how much they care about this. It might drive sales of a new phone, or it might drive the phone manufacturers to continue offering updates longer. I mean, they're choosing not to. It's not that they couldn't keep those older phones updated, that no one's making them. And so if the Android OS itself performed that notification task, users would be annoyed if a certain brand of phone started doing that after only 2 years. The point is the service life of the phone is much longer than that. It ought to be kept secure throughout its service life. And at that point, it ought to just shut down If it's not going to be kept updated,
That's a good point.
sorry.
Yeah.
I mean, the security really is part of what's being delivered.
Yeah. This is a tough one. I think I'm gonna have to just say, don't let friends use Android.
I, I would, the only way to do it is to be on the Google or maybe on the Samsung train and be willing to keep yourself current with a new phone. I mean, I know that,
It's expensive. That's the real problem.
it is.
We're talking a lot
exactly
of money.
right.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Otherwise, I think I agree with you, Leo, that, Apple is doing a great job of keeping phones that, don't even run on battery any longer, still updated with security. And, hats off to them. It's, I agree with you. No one wants a monoculture, but, everybody I know, with a few exceptions, is is the blue bubble in iMessage, not the green bubble.
Yeah.
Let's take a break, and
Okay.
I'm going to sip on some coffee, and then we're going to talk about these a new side channel attack that's been found that affects AMD processors.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah.